Welcome back to the Casual Armory. Today I got back my 6.5 RussMor. So we're going to do some bedding. We're going to bed the action into the stock. And while I was talking to a few friends of mine that go up and casually shoot, nobody seemed to know what bedding was. So before I begin, for people out there that may or may not know what bedding is, I brought out my Remington and I took the action out so we can look at the bedding and we can get a better explanation for what bedding actually is. So bedding is basically using a very, very strong epoxy and laying out a layer of epoxy in the bed of the rifle so you can get a perfect negative mold of what the underside of the action is. And the reason for this is simply because if I were just to bolt this into a wooden stock, under recoil, the action can actually move and wiggle. Sometimes, no matter how tight the action screws are, you can actually get the action wiggling and moving in the stock under recoil, and that negatively affects the accuracy of the rifle. So, that's a basic understanding of it. And when you're done, it should fit very, very snug. And this one does. It takes a little bit of pressure for it to sit down into the bedding. So, let's get this put back together, and we're going to get the 6.5, and we'll go through the steps of bedding the action to the stock. Alright, so here's the stock for the 6.5. The first thing we're going to look at is the front lug. So we've got the hole where the front lug goes, and you can see the front lug is much smaller in size than the hole we've had to make to get the bolt to go in properly. And also, here at the rear, you can see there's a nice gap around the tang. So, the first thing we're going to do in the bedding process is we're going to use some modeling clay. And this is just some basic, everyday crafting modeling clay, nothing special. And we're going to make a dam around this front lug hole here on the left, so the epoxy doesn't squish out and get places we don't want it. So what we basically want is we want all of the excess epoxy to come up and out of the channel, and the clay will help make sure that happens. So let's get to using the clay, and we're going to dam this up. Okay, with a dam in front of and behind this front lug, now we're going to bolt the action into the stock. We're going to bolt it down nice and tight, and it's going to give us the impression on the clay of the action. So let's get the action bolted in. Okay, now the action's bolted in, and prior to bolting it in, I did use a spray release agent. It just helps for the clay not to stick to the metal Release agent is MR312 zinc spray from Spray On. This will also be used for the epoxy, so the epoxy does not stick to the metal action. So you can see just a little bit of clay squeezing out. So, all right, she's nice and tight and she's where she should be. So now we're going to take it back apart and we're going to inspect to make sure that the clay did exactly what it was supposed to do. So let's take it apart. All right, looks like we've got a good setup with the clay. And now we're just going to trim it just a little bit so it's nice and square. We're going to hope it doesn't move too much. Well, we just want to square it up so it'll look good when the action's taken out. Okay. So, all right, we've got that. Now we are going to look at the next step, which is going to be actually mixing up some epoxy and starting the first process of bedding this front recoil lug. Now, the compound and epoxy we're going to be using for this is DevCon standard 10-110 plastic steel putty. This seems to be the best that I've come across for bedding actions. It's highly recommended by pretty much every gunsmith out there. It's very, very popular. It's a two-part epoxy. You got a putty hardener in one little tub, and then you've got a resin putty in the second tub. And let's get started with that. Okay, I've got the epoxy mixed up and it's looking good. I put a little bit of tape along the bedding line of the stock because it's going to ooze out and it's going to probably try to make a mess. So I also sprayed down the action very thoroughly with release agent. Also, I took the front action screw, put a little bit of clay on it, and stuck it up in the hole, and likewise also sprayed it with release agent. So let's cross our fingers. Alright, so she's bolted back together. She's nice and snug. We had a little bit squeeze out right here, but I think I may have gauged it just about right. We didn't have a lot of squeeze out. I mixed up probably a little too much, but let's let this set up. It says that it should be set up in about 45 minutes. Functional cure time is 14 hours, and fully cured is 24. So we're going to wait probably about, maybe about an hour, hour and a half. We're going to see if that's set up strong enough to remove the action and continue working. All right, I'll see you in an hour and a half. All right, well, the front lug seems to be done and set up nicely, and it's really dirty with zinc. So we'll clean that all up when we're done entirely. But now we're going to move on to the rear tang. I already have a little bit of clay in the rear tang area, and we're going to get this action sprayed up and reset in, and we're going to do the rear tang the exact same way we did the front recoil lug, and we'll be right back. And here's the rear tang. The action's torqued back down. Compound, the epoxy is in. We scraped away all the excess. Yeah. We're just going to let it set up, and we'll catch up with it in a couple hours when it's all set up. Alright, here she is, all bedded up. Action is back in its stock, and we're ready to take it to the range and see what she does with a fresh brand new barrel. Alright, I'll catch you on the next video, which should be range day tomorrow. Catch you next time. Bye.